Hello everybody, this is going to be the final video in the series on the Cyberpunk Street. I think I'm calling it quits at this point, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about the scene, anything else that I may have done, and I'll show you a couple of final renders. So here it is, and I've got the garbage cans in there. Now I decided to stick with the one I had modeled originally and just dent it up a little bit, just using proportional editing. And I've done the garbage bags here. They don't look that great. Some of them are only partials, to cut down on the polys. Not that that was very important, but a lot of them are just half of a bag, the part that I needed. And instead of doing a video on them, there's so many videos that are very similar in process. So I'll link you to just one of them. They're like shorts. It takes like a minute to do, and you just shrink wrap a cube to a bunch of objects. Maybe you might shrink wrap a couple of times, subdivision, and sculpt and smooth, and that's it pretty much. And apply a very basic blender material that's black and shiny, maybe with a bit of noise. Certainly there are things that you could do more, but that's all that I wanted to do. And I decided I wasn't going to add any more objects other than these boxes that are here. I got rid of this thing that was hanging there. It wasn't really doing anything for me. I put a little something up here and a couple more pipes and cables, and I actually forgot to texture one. I'm sure you'll see it. But that's it. As far as lighting goes, there's nothing special at all in my scene, just a bunch of point lights at various spots that seem to not be too conspicuous, because it's weird to have light all of a sudden where you don't have another light. So for example, up here I have these emissions, okay, as a small little plane with emission, and I've got a light. I've got an area light. I decided instead of using like 6 point lights, I'd have one big area light. And so where I have light, it hopefully makes sense, so around here, around these lights, and over here under this light. And I do have a few point lights in addition where you wouldn't see an obvious light source, but hopefully it doesn't look too, like all of a sudden there's light where there shouldn't be. There's more that I could do. I always say that, especially on the street. But my daughter's sick right now, and I've got to attend to her, and I've got other things to do, and a bunch of requests and stuff like that. So I figured I'm just going to leave it. And in fact, you'll notice in the render that I had a sign over here. This one is going to say open 24/7 with an arrow pointing down. And I decided I didn't like the 3D text that I had here, and so I just copied it over. It says the same thing. So I guess over these like garage-like doors, it's the same thing. And I could change that, but anyways, it looks like I don't see my sign in there, but hopefully I still have it. I have it in the render. So I'm going to just show you what the final looks like. Let's see. I guess we'll have a look at this one. So this is at 65%. This is in Eevee, and I used just 150 samples, and then I did some post-processing in GIMP and in another software. So there's that sign I was talking about. You can see open 24/7 on both sides. I just felt having the 3D text stood out. It didn't seem to make sense. Even though this is 3D, I wanted them all to be sort of graphical instead of 3D. But this is what it looks like. There's the garbage bags. I could have spent more time on them. I just did them quickly just to throw them in the scene and to finalize things. But this is what it looks like. I've got the door here. I ended up changing this pattern. I did this in Substance Painter, so it's just like one plane here and one plane there with the pattern. I've done videos on that before. If anyone wants to know, I can talk about it. But yeah, so there's that door there. There's a box here, the garbage cans, and move over to the garage door. Textured the ACs very similarly to where I did the ACs in The Last of Us. I was doing air conditioners and stuff like that. So they're the same kind of thing. There you can see those emissions that are up there. So it's sort of a mixture of like old-fashioned or kind of some exotic thing with sci-fi almost. So I'm not quite sure what my focus was. And this is a big problem for people like me who came from the music side of things as my art to doing this, and not necessarily always having the right vision for this. And I struggled with this, and I considered even dropping it, saying, I'm done with this. And I still see that when I look at this. I'm just being honest with you. I mean, I like the way it turned out, but I realize that what I lack is a certain vision for what it is what story I'm trying to tell. I get very wrapped up in the modeling, and hey, I can model this, and hey, I can model that. And that's just a lesson for myself, because I've had a lot of internal dialogue about that very problem, and I'm addressing it. I'm working on it. But from an artist point of view, or if you were a painter, what this could tell a story. It's just somehow when I look at it, it looks like a lot of stuff. It's cool stuff, but it looks like a lot of stuff. Like, hey, I'm going to model an arch, and I'm going to put a design on it. I'm going to model some pipes and a garage door thing. And I feel like I get caught up in the modeling and the texturing. And then sometimes, and if you ever feel this way, if you ever look at your art and say, I don't know, man, something just doesn't feel right, I don't know what it is, that could be what it is. There might be just too much stuff and not enough story. Now, you may not feel that way when you look at this. You may say, hey, it's just fine. So maybe it's just a little bit of a personal thing that I'm going through with my own art, and the fact that I don't have an art background other than music. And, I maybe have got some 3D skills, and maybe even it's a little bit of texturing skills. But what I lack is that eye. And this is why I've been telling my kids to keep coloring and take art and learn about art, because that's something that I never did, and I think I suffer from it. At any rate, I'm not trying to put myself down too much or whatever, and I'm not going to stop doing this, and I don't want you to be like looking at my stuff really critically every time now, because that sets the bar higher, and I want to have fun. I'm doing this for fun, and to teach a few things along the way. But one thing I won't be teaching you is some of those real artsy things. And let's have a look at the other render. It's not much different, really. It's just another sort of view and a little closer up, because I can't really take you around the corner. I didn't model down there. And that's something I do want to actually address. One reason why some of this might even feel a little bit off might be the lighting. Not simply because I'm not a professional lighter, but also because there is nothing on this side. And it's, I think, always a good idea even just to block out stuff on this side, other buildings of different heights and shapes, so that the light will interact with it. And that's a better way of doing things. There may be shadows that should be there, or even reflections that aren't because of that. So that's something to keep in mind. Just, even if something's not going to be seen in your render, it might be there in reality, and that would have an impact on the lighting. And that's something that I didn't do. But anyhow, there's 100%. I did the speaker in Substance Painter, so that's not real geometry there. And I don't know what else to tell you about this. It was a lot of fun to do. You can see that I changed the tiles. I got away from that yellow to a more white. I just felt it blended in better with what should be the concrete. And that's it. I mean, what it lacks, okay, I'll tell you this. Some of you may be much better artists, texture artists I'm talking about in particular, modeling to some extent too, though, than I am. And you may already know this, but what it is lacking is damage. And that is a difficult thing to achieve. It's another level of complexity on top of what already took me quite a while to do. I have stuck for a long portion of time on my channel with the hard surface type modeling, and there still would be some damage to that unless you're buying a brand new toaster and it's never been touched. It's one thing to model that way, and then when you're dealing with damage, like split wood, bent wood, and dented metal, and then as well rust and stuff like that. Like you can obviously do that kind of stuff in Substance Painter and discoloration, and that again it all takes time. But you're either looking at using something like ZBrush, I tend to call it ZBrush here in Canada, ZBrush, or sculpting. You can do some just, with like I did in the garbage bags. Like, I mean, you could have just done like a balloon-shaped thing. Obviously, there is what would, kind of simulate damage by using the cloth brush in sculpting, and so it becomes more realistic, but the poly count goes up. And then you got to think about, do I want to do a high poly to low poly workflow? And then, that just adds to it all. And when I'm trying to do this on video, it all takes time and effort and computer processing power, and so there is a lot to it, and so therefore I have stayed away to some extent from that, and I only recently started doing the more apocalyptic type stuff because I'm very interested in that, and I think many of you are too, with the big games like Uncharted and The Last of Us and all of that genre. And I think that's probably the genre that I want to continue going into, because I'm getting much more interested in both Substance Painter and in particular Substance Designer, which I always promise I'm going to bring more into the workflow and never quite do, because it's just another layer of work. And people are already saying, can I do this in Blender, and can you stick in Blender? And Blender is a fantastic thing, but it's not the be-all, end-all. And if you start going beyond that, you're introducing another level of complexity, and it's time consuming, and it's learning the software and how to integrate it and how to get the size of the textures in Designer to work in Blender. What are you going to come from Designer into Painter first? And there's a lot to it, but Designer is what you're going to need to do stuff like Uncharted. All that stuff and The Last of Us is made in Designer. Maybe a little bit of other stuff, but mostly in Designer. So, for example, when you're looking at tiles and floors and rocks and the temples and a lot of these things. Like, I mean, you can do an air conditioner. You can do 3D stuff, because there's tessellation in Designer. So when you're following Nate in Uncharted and he's going into the temple and there's all these things, it's some of it's basic geometry, but a lot of it is actual Designer, and it can pop out at you and look like it's really 3D. So that is the one that you need for doing that, and it takes a lot of time, because Designer is you're not. This is why you see all those videos with the spinning ball with the rock texture or the brick texture. Like, here's a tutorial on how to do this, or a time lapse, because they do it in Designer, and maybe they render in Marmoset, or usually along that line, and that's it. You don't see it go into the game or into the scene very often. And that's actually something that I've wanted to do, and some of you have commented on, is not just telling you how to do something, but showing you how I would do it. I'm not telling you or showing you how you should do it. I'm telling you or showing you how I am doing it. And that means I'm not always right, and it doesn't always work out well, and I'm not that great at it. But my role, I figure, what I want to do, my genre, is I'm going to do some videos, like, for example, this one, and I'm not just going to show how I did a metal. I'm not going to show how I did the bumps on here. I'm going to show how I used it in a scene, for better or for worse. And that's what I feel my role is, and that's what I want to do. So if I wanted to do something like Uncharted, which I am dying to, my son is, again, he's playing it, and he's asking me to watch him play it. And I'm bringing my phone in, my camera in, I'm taking pictures. I love it. I think it's amazing. And it is. These 20-some-year-old guys and girls that are fantastic artists. I'm 62. Gosh, I wish I went down that road sometimes. or if I could do it again, I had the time. But, to start trying to do that, which I do want to do in little bits, would take about 3 steps: designer, substance painter, blender, and it would take a lot of work. And so we'll get there. We'll get there, but that's what it's all about. So you got to get designer, and you got to get good at it. And if you can do anything. And then there's the game engine itself, and then there's Unreal. All right, and all of the intricacies of that, from the lighting to the special effects to the shaders to many things that I don't know about, not to mention the animation. So there's a lot to this. So this is what I've got, and this is where I end it. And I have plans to go on and continue to try to achieve a game-like look, which really I'm not really going to be able to do in Blender. I really will need to move to the game engine. And so I'll get into that down the road. I'll continue to model these kind of things because I love doing it, and I love showing how I do it. And people can follow along and apply it to their own scenes. But, I have been asked about damage before, and I can tell that is lacking, especially when I look at stuff like this. And again, I could take proportional editing and I could bend this and stuff, but it becomes higher poly and it takes more time. Maybe I could just do an arch, a stone arch, and that's it, because it would take time to do all that. And, but if you want to do a whole scene, then you look at this and you say, hey, that looks pretty good. Something looks off. Well, there could be a number of things that look off, from the lighting to the scale, maybe. No, that's not usually too bad for me. To the, where are all the leaks, and where is the rust, and where is the dents and the damage? And if you start doing that on the metals, you better do it on everything, and you just get into a world of pain. Vegetation is another thing, and debris. Anyhow, there's a lot to do, but we do what we can in these scenes, and we leave it at that, and we move on, and we don't have any vain ideas that we are some incredible artists. We're enjoying, we're being artistic, and we're creating something potentially that didn't exist before, and it's so much fun to do, and it's so much fun when it looks cool. And when you do get frustrated and you say something just doesn't seem right, it certainly could be the lighting, it could be the textures, it could be the scale, it could be the fact that really, you think you're going for a grungy kind of environment, but there isn't as much damage. This road ended up looking weird. It ended up looking flat and whitish, but there's only a little puddle here. There's so many things that can go wrong that a trained artist or one of these guys or gals that work on Uncharted would spot instantly. And they do multiple passes on it. They model it. They have their base textures on it, and then they go in with about 3 different brushes, and they can paint in leaks, they can paint in damage, they can paint in vegetation, and it all sort of builds up in layers. And anyways, I'm not trying to put myself down. I'm just trying to be realistic and to tell you that there are places where I can improve when I have the time. And some of my frustrations, in case you're falling into that too and going, my artwork doesn't look as good as whatever. Yeah, well, from the story to the camera perspective to the camera angle, this is not at 50 millimeters, whatever. I think this was even either 30 or 35 millimeters. I'm not really into the blurring farther away type stuff. My eyes don't see like that. I'm not. My eyes aren't a DSLR camera. That can be useful, to give that effect. But I'm not really that interested in something sharp up close and something blurry in the distance. I don't see that much in computer games. Not to my eye, anyhow. Mist and God rays and stuff all looks cool. Again, you can overdo all those things just like we did with the what's that called? the sun rays in Photoshop, the whatever that spot is, that we put everywhere, and same with emissions, you can go overboard. Same with shininess and the low roughness. We want everything to be shiny, because we're like little kids. And so I think less is generally better. Start with less. It's the same thing with mixing music. You don't start with the faders up. You start with bring everything down, and then you start incrementally bringing stuff up instead of trying to have them all compete and figuring this and that. You bring it all down. So bring it all down and then just bring it up a little bit, just to the point. Maybe overshoot it a little bit and then bring it down a little bit. Okay, because less is more, and when you combine it all together, everything will have its own place and sparkle. I don't always do that. Anyways, it was fun doing this, and we're just sort of critiquing it for educational purposes. We'll try to improve the next time, but yeah. So thanks so much for watching the series. I will be doing some more beginner stuff because there's some more beginner blenderers coming by and want to know how to model some simple things, and I think that's great. We gotta do that, and we'll do some more texturing, and we'll keep going with this tile stuff because there's a lot of tiled structures. So the better we can get at this, or the more times we do it, and we improve the grout, and we improve the texture of the tiles, and figure out how to get a little bit of damage in there, and keep going with the concrete, because again, tile and concrete and wood and metal, those are our main things. And even if we're not using Designer, if we're using Painter and Blender to some extent, the more we can do, even little bits will help, like using proportional editing and sculpting on this. They were high poly, but again, like I said, I cut off a lot of it where I could. That'll improve better than just a balloon there. So baby steps we'll take, and we'll create more and more environments and street scenes and little temples, and we'll just get better and better at it. And will we be on some of the wrong roads doing it the wrong way? Yes, we will. But until somebody comes along in the industry that can really guide us along the path without making us spend $1,000 on ZBrush and whatever, we'll do what we can and what we enjoy, and then by all means go off to art school, game school. All right, I wish I could do that at 62. I looked into it actually, but we'll see. All right. Thank you so much for coming by. I love to see you here, and I hope you'll come by again for my little contribution here, and and what you're doing. That's what's important to you, and I understand that. So take care of yourselves. We'll see you again soon.